everyone. My name is Shanina. I'm the program director here at HHREC. I'm here with PJ and Anoop. We're here to listen to PJ's story. Just to give you a little background about his story, PJ was born on the borderline of Cambodia and Thailand in a refugee camp. Later came to the U.S. As a small child. Later, in his teenage years, joined a gang, and then at the age of 14 was sentenced to 20 years in prison, in adult prison, I might add. After serving the 20 years in prison, right now he's fighting a deportation case, but also doing profound, phenomenal work in the community. And I am here to introduce him and have him to share his story. So PJ, welcome. And let's start from the top, start from the beginning.
All right. Thank you. I am PJ. I work as a community advocate with the Asian Prison Support Committee here in Oakland. And my story is a common story of Cambodians community, especially for the 1.5 generation, what we call ourselves, folks who came to the United States around 1980s, early 70s. So sometime like during the 70s, late 70s, 80s, U.S. did a lot of campaign in Southeast Asia, meaning that a lot of our country was bombed during this operation, and Cambodia, in particular, has suffered so much bombing that it had created instability in our country, which allowed the Pol Pot, which is the Khmer Rouge, the leader of the Khmer Rouge, rise to power, and they started committing mass genocide. And the idea that they were operating under was that they wanted to change the culture and the landscape and our history and some of our just the narrative of our country, right? And they started targeting people with education, people like teachers, doctors, lawyers, anyone who has some kind of education became a target. And my mom was married to a teacher, and she had 2 kids, my older brother and a baby. Because she was married to a teacher, they became a target. So they arrested our entire family, took her husband in, and they executed him because of his background. They put my mom into a camp where she was worked from sunup to sundown. And at the time, because of her condition, because of her confinement and being forced to do manual labor without having any food, right? They barely gave her enough food to survive. She wasn't able to produce milk, and so she was unable to feed the baby. And so my older brother died. I don't remember how old he was, but he was really, he's an infant. And then my older brother, who was a little older, I think he was like 4, 5 maybe, and he started really fending for himself, right? Porching, throughout the jungle and was able to find enough for him to survive. And during this time, they obviously they killed over 1 million people during this whole campaign with Khmer Rouge. And my mom pretty much was forced as she was in the camp to work for the Khmer Rouge, and was also forced to watch her entire family get butchered. So they would torture my uncle, they would kill my grandma, grandpa, and all of her siblings was murdered in front of her. And I think it was a way of just breaking her down psychologically. They actually made her work. I think my mom at some point wanted to give up her life, but they made her work for them so that her younger sister would live, right? And her younger sister was also captured and also forced to work in the military because she has military experience. So they recruited her as a second lieutenant. And during her first operation, she was hit by RPG. And till today, she survived, but she limped till today. So she can barely move on one leg, and she still will limp her whole life after that. So I think sometime during their captivities, the Khmer Rouge started having conflict with each other. I think they were fighting for power. They were fighting for resources, and while at the same time, the Vietnamese soldier invaded Cambodia, and all throughout the whole chaos, right? This was happening. My mom was able to escape, and she ran to her old village, and when she made it there, the villager captured her, right? And they were really angry about what had happened with the Khmer Rouge. And so they tried to kill her. And they actually killed the people who escaped with her. They came up from this place saying that she should have not worked for the Khmer Rouge. She should have just died. And so because she worked for the Khmer Rouge, they wanted to kill her. At the time, there was a villager elder who was present. She was well respected. And she begged for my mom's life. And she said to the villager, like, if you kill her, you also kill her son, and her son has nothing to do with this, and you should not condemn her son to die, right? And so they spared her life. And she escaped with my brother, and somehow through her journey made it to Thailand. And at this point, when she was in Thailand, she met my dad. And at first, she didn't really marry him out of love. You know, she was a young woman with a kid, you know, in a foreign country, and just didn't have any resources and vulnerable. So she married him out of like protection. Later, they fell in love and built a relationship, and I was born. So I was born and raised in a refugee camp until I was 5 years old. So I witnessed the whole, like, I still remember it. There's some stuff I don't remember because I was so young, but there are certain things that I just remember feeling, like the feeling of being scared, you know, the feeling of like just pressure, right? Pressure into like extreme fear. And I think partly because my mom would always like shake us up, and then, you know, I remember seeing flames, like people carrying torches and stuff running around, and lamps and stuff like that. And that soldier or bandit was coming in. And, you know, like there was a lot of abuse, there was rape, there was all kind of crime happening in a refugee camp. And so I remember like these feelings around it, so I don't remember the whole story, but you know, I think part of my memory just, I was too young to really, to remember those stuff. But I still remember how I felt in those areas. And so when 5 years old, I think my mom someone petitioned us to come to the country. And so I don't know if it was through a lottery, but I do know that there was I call him uncle. My mom told me to call him uncle. He's not our blood relative, but I think he has been a friend to the family, a very close friend, and they kind of like adopted each other as siblings. And so he petitioned my mom to come, and at least that's what I think happened, because we came here under refugee status, and they would give us a green card. So we were a green card holder, and so we came here legally through a plane, and actually they flew us to Seattle, I think. I think we stopped in like China and Philippines before we ended up in the United States. And afterward, we landed in Santa Ana, and this individual I was just mentioning, my mom's uncle, her uncle, not a brother relative, but yeah, he would welcome us in, and you know, I remember him showering me. His wife actually took me as soon as I left, so we came in the house. He was like, "You come with me," and then he showered me. It was like really, really weird experience. Like, for one, I was on a plane, and then I was somehow end up in in the seat where there's a window, and so, you know, I looked out the window, and the plane took off, right? So I was like, "Oh, dang, this thing's flying!" Like, so I was amazed, like this kid, right, who just grew up in this very bad environment, very bad condition, always in fear, and then I'm like, I'm in the air, right? Because I remember, you know, people saying you're lucky you're going to the United States, and I didn't know what that meant, but I just felt like that was something special. And I'm on the plane, and then they gave me a burger. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know it was food, but I just watched the other people around me. They started eating, and then so I did what they did, and I was like, oh my God, that was the most tasty, beautiful thing I ever tasted. So my first introduction to the United States was a hamburger on a plane. And so I still remember the taste of it. I was really excited. I just ate the whole thing really fast. And then, so, you know, kind of fast forward, I end up in this stranger's house who's supposed to be my mom's uncle. And this woman was showering me, right? And she put me in the shower, and it's like, she turned the shower on. At first, I thought, like, because I was thirsty. I've been, you know, having drink water for a long time. And Cambodia would have these like little bowl of water to come, you know, that you have to like really go out there and get it, and you have to boil it and then put it in this little bowl. So when I first saw the toilet, I thought that was the bowl. And I tried to drink out of the toilet, and this lady just stopped me. She's like, you don't drink out the toilet. This is not for drinking, right? And so I was really confused. Like, why can't I drink out of it? It's like, it's water right there. And so she said, no, that's not the water you drink. And I don't think she ever really explained it to me. I guess, she just wanted to shower me. So then she put me in the shower and she turned on the shower. And then there's another like very eye-opening thing, just witnessing water come out of nowhere, right, from this little metal thing. So I had like very memorable moments coming to the United States. And so what had happened was, Santa Ana was a place we lived for maybe several months. I'm gonna say like 7 to 8 months. I didn't really like settle well in Santa Ana. My mom and my dad was really missing home. They were feeling really isolated. They're in another country. Just a lot of fear, a lot of unknown, and they didn't know what to do. And so they started like searching for other places, right? And they found out that in Stockton, there's a lot of Cambodian community who they know in the camp. So my mom and my dad wanted to move closer to an environment where they have people they know that they can get support from and that they could, just talk to and just, I think partly because they're experiencing so much trauma and there's a lot of stuff that happened in their life and that they needed somebody they can relate to. And, Santa Ana wasn't a place that provide that for them. And, I mean, for myself, I think, like, my journey was much different than my parents'. I think the way I felt about the world was different. I think I was so young, so I didn't know a lot of things. I didn't understand a lot of things. And I remember, like, a moment, I was on a playground. I think my mom was going to get some ice cream. And I was with these kids, and they were, like, laugh at me. And then the guy was looking at me, so, I didn't know what it was, right? Like, what was happening. So I started laughing back at him, and then the kid just, like, looked at me all with an angry face, like he really angry for some reason, and he punched me in the face. I'm like, why did he do that, right? And it took me a minute to realize that he was laughing because he was laughing at me, and because I laughed back, with him, because I was trying to make a friend, and then, he was angry that I laughed, and so he hit me in the face. But that was like my first like moment where I realized, okay, I'm not wanted here, right? And that theme kind of echoed through my life. That's why I'm sharing it now. That kind of like led me to a lot of dark places. But that was my first moment of feeling rejection. And then when we ended up in Stockton, we settled in a community, with a lot of violence, drugs, gangs, and I think all that came out because of the condition we were in. Right, we was a impoverished community, over police area, and a lot of trauma. So, what we thought would be like a better place where we can find support, where we can like grow and do better things, turned out to be like the opposite, right? Because we live in a community where other folks who also witness, the family, being murdered in Khmer Rouge, and all this trauma kind of come up, right? So you're in a community full of trauma, and everyone there's a lot of mistrust. They don't trust outsiders, so there's no support, like not mental health support. There's not like a lot of resources available for us. So kids would gravitate towards gangs for protection, to form solidarity and to get that sense of family, right? Because there's a disconnect, like when you go to school, for example. I would go to school. I would experience some bullying. People would spit on me. Yell at me to go back to your country. I would feel all this anger, confusion, the sadness. But I couldn't talk that to my mom, right? For many different reasons. For example, like my mom, she was, my dad pretty much left us, right? Because I think when he started to resettle more into the country, he started to really, really, experience his trauma and more in depth, right? Because he lost all of his family members, so he didn't have no family ties left, and I don't think he ever got over it, and I don't think he ever like dealt with it healthily, right? So he ended up isolating himself. He started using drugs to numb the pain, and I think as a man, as a Cambodian man, I think that did a lot of psychological damage to him. Maybe there's some shame around it as well. And so he was just left us for months and just never came home, right? And we didn't know where he was. So I didn't grow up with a big father figure. And, when I'm in trouble, I'm afraid to tell my mom because, for one, I didn't want to put more on her plate because she's raising 6 kids on her own in a foreign country, not speaking the language, right? And she has her own trauma, like I would listen to her cry at night. very often because she missed her mom, he missed her brother, and sometimes she would have nightmares. She would have like these flashbacks, especially when there's like helicopters and stuff. They would scream. My dad would actually used to scream in the middle of the night when she'd hear the sound of a helicopter. And I think it's like the sound reminded him of the helicopter in the country when the bombing and the shooting and all this stuff was happening in the country. But obviously Stockton, where I live at, had a lot of gangs, so there's a lot of like shootings and stuff happens, and so that's kind of like a little big trigger for a community, especially like you grew up from a war-torn country, surviving gunfire, constantly, and here you are, like you're in a country you're supposed to be providing you safety and helping you heal from your trauma and providing you with an opportunity, right? And you're in a environment where constantly reminding you of you're back in the surviving mode, right? So I witnessed a lot of that stuff. And Mom would like drag us out of bed quickly and would just toss us underneath these like the desk, and my mom would fold clothes on top of the desk, and so we would like grab the clothes and we would get some other cover in the clothes. But I think she was afraid that we might get hit by those bullets, right? And so that was kind of like my introduction to Stockton. And over time, school used to be even though I didn't like I didn't feel accepted. I didn't feel like I belonged because of cultural differences, language barriers. I still felt like that was a safe place for me, right? Because in my community, it's a lot of violence. There's a lot of stuff happening, and I didn't want to be around this area. And so school became like a thing that I want to go to, and other Cambodian kids would just come with us, right? So I get to play with them, and I get to eat lunch at the cafeteria. So I always look forward to the breakfast and the lunch that they gave us, and and I was try to make friends, right? And as much as I can anyway. But I think my life started changing like dramatically is when a guy named Patrick Purdy came to Cleveland Elementary School with an AK-47, and he started firing, from the rooftop into the students, killing my cousin, killing other students and injuring teachers. I mean, more than 36 people was injured during the shooting, and for me it was a really weird experience, right? Because like in my neighborhood we would always like have fireworks too, right? So besides the gunfire, like we always have fireworks, and fireworks is like a fun time. Like we go out there, we hear the sound of firecrackers, and we run over there, and everyone just like making a big old scene, and people yelling and happy, right? Seeing the fireworks, and sometimes we like they light up those little sparkly ones, and people would just like cheer, right? And jumping over the firecrackers and stuff. So we had a lot of fun doing it. And when I heard the sound of the gunfire, I thought it was firecracker at first. So me and my friend Rith, we ran towards the sound when we heard it, and then like halfway, I think, when we got to the playground, we started seeing people fall. Like the kids started screaming, teachers started coming out of the classroom yelling, and I think I froze because I saw my cousin was gunned down in front of me, and I didn't know what to make of it. Like I just everything just kind of went slow motion, and I just froze, and I didn't realize that I was froze until my friend started shaking me. So he shook me, because I think I was just zoned out, and he shook me, and I came back to conscious, and they're like, "Oh shit!" And he's like, "Let's go, dude, let's go." So he started dragging me, and so we started running away from the gunfire, and we could still hear like the sound of the bullet just sipping by our heads, right? So as we were running away, and one of the student that was in front of us got shot in the leg, so he was limping, and we stopped, and then we dragged him because he was crying and he couldn't move. So me and my friend dragged him, and we dragged him all the way to the bathroom, and that's kind of where we went towards, because the bathroom is all like concrete wall. We knew that if we get to the bathroom, we would be safe. And so we dragged the kid. He was limping while we dragged him, and we made it. We made it like almost to the bathroom door, and one of the janitor came out. I think it's a janitor. It was somebody. For some reason, I remember him as to be a janitor, but he came out yelling for us to drop the kid, and so we dropped the kid, and we ran away. He said, "Just drop the kid and go to the cafeteria." And so we ran to the cafeteria, and we made it to the cafeteria, and it was really like chaotic moment, right? No one knows what's happening. Kids are crying. teachers are in there trying to comfort people, and it was like hundreds of students, and I was in the cafeteria, and I was sitting next to this girl, and I noticed like her leg was wet, and so I pointed it out to her, say, "Hey, what's wrong with your leg? Why is it wet?" Right, and turns out she got shot in the butt, and she didn't even know she got shot. Right, she was just shocked from the whole experience, and so when she saw the blood, when I pointed it out, she started crying, and so one of the teachers came and got her. Yeah, and that was like the experience I have. I think I never really like fully processed what happened. I think a part of me just kind of internalized it as like, the message like you're not wanted, right? And then I think that kind of stuck in my brain because it was a strong message. Like they don't want me so bad that they will try to kill us, right? And that was the message I got. And then school became like a non-safe place for me, so I just shut down completely after that. I didn't trust adults. I didn't trust people. I didn't go to the funeral. I mean, I didn't go to school for days, right? When the school reopened, I didn't go. And when I finally came back to school, I think my mom kept pushing me to go to school. So when I ended up going back, I mean, you can still see like bullet holes on the concrete wall. There's still blood on the playground. It was a really weird, really sad moment, right, to witness. Also scary, and I don't think I ever trust my environment after that. But those are like the moments, kind of like changed the way I see life, the way I see people in my community, and my life didn't really like change completely until I came to school one day and there was one of my neighbors was getting like beat up by some bullies. It's older adults, and they were spit at him like you don't belong here, and so I got involved. I joined in, yell at the bullies like don't hit them, and I dragged the kid out, and then they end up beating me up over it. And from that day on, like they started targeting me. Right, they'll come over and they'll chase me around, and they would catch me too. Like they'll chase me for miles, like literally chase me for miles and beat me up. And they would always come in group, so I would always fight them back. And I was an angry kid. At this point, I was just so angry at life and angry at everything. And I didn't really understand that, right? I didn't understand what I was feeling because, that wasn't something like someone my age would understand. I just realized I was angry, and I would just always fight back. And I was just like, chase these bully, and they will beat me up all day. And finally, they get tired of me, and they walk away, and then they'll come back again tomorrow or the next week. And this has happened for like a year. And then one day I just got tired. I'm like, you know what? Fuck you guys.
I just wanted to also note the shooting that PJ survived at Cleveland Elementary was the first mass school shooting in the U.S. And now it's become so common, but that was really the first mass school shooting. And the shooter went there specifically to kill Southeast Asian refugee children. And I think almost all the victims, like PJ, were refugees. And so it was not just the first school shooting, but it was I think still the deadliest mass attack of anti-Asian hate in this country. Yeah, and that stuck to me, right, like to today. Sometimes I think about it. I mean, sometimes I dream about it, right? It's just a matter of days, like how I feel. But especially when I feel isolated, when I feel lonely, I think like that. Some of the memories from my childhood kind of come back. And yeah, so these bully would just beat me up for a year, and I got tired of it. So I ended up joining a gang, right? Because I'm gonna find my own friends, and the neighborhood gang would always like be nice to me. They were like, come on, man, join us. So I ended up joining the gang. They became my family. I mean, really easy, right? I grew up very subconscious, like feeling not wanted, not accepted, and then all of a sudden, like these dudes shows up, and they'll give you hugs and tell me, I got your back, you're my family. Like. As a kid, like that felt really good, I'm like, man, this is awesome, right? And like instantly, it's so crazy. Like, I joined the gang, and everyone saw me join the gang, get jumped in, and the bully stops.
Wait, clarifying question. So the initiation was you just get jumped, like you and a bunch of people.
Yeah, they would jump you in. So they would bring me over. But that's kind of part of the initiation process. I think for me at the time, I thought was like a measurement of being a tough guy, right? To be part of us, you got to be a tough guy, right? And so, yeah, so that there was like 4 people, but they told me about it first, right? Like, you join us, then, you're part of our family. We're gonna love you as a brother, and this is our brotherhood. But we got to test you, right? So So I got jumped by like 4 guys, might even be 5. Now I can't remember it clearly, and then for like a minute, they just swing at you and you just endure the beating for a minute. And now we're done, and they pick you up and they dust you off and then everyone give you a hug, and like pretty much like I think like for me when that moment happened, I always feel strong too. I feel like not only I was accepted, there's something bigger and more like better and powerful than me, but I feel like I'm a part of something now, right? Like part of a community, part of a family, part of a brotherhood, and that made me feel really good. And gang became my life. Gang became my life. I was willing to do anything to keep the gang, right? Because it felt good to know that people got your back and people was there for you. And I was living a really like almost kind of double life, right? Because my mom always see me as this good kid, quiet kid, right? And I would dress nicely as a good kid, but then like later on when I'm out on the street, I would dress differently. I would go to the gang outfit, you would have all your different colors and you would sag your pants and all that stuff, right? I wasn't a sagger, but I still did the color stuff. But yeah, and then like gang became my life, and then it was so I was going to do anything for them, right? So I got into a life of crime with them, stealing cars, originally shoplifting and things like that. And then over time, we just kind of graduated. When you're doing crime, you just naturally graduated.
So can you explain graduated? So like with the, I get what you're saying, but for the people out there, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think I started stealing cars, right? So shoplifting to stealing cars. And then, one day my old homie, called him the OG, right? They're the original gangster, right? They're the old homies. They asked me, hey, will you join us to do a robbery, in a liquor store in San Jose? And, I didn't want to disappoint them, like for me, it was like, okay, I was willing to do anything for them. And so I agreed to it. And then we actually drove to San Jose to commit a robbery. And I won't mention, a victim's name because I don't have permission to say that out loud in this platform, right? But, I was in San Jose and my co-defendant, went to the store with a loaded gun. He gave me another gun, so I came in there with him. And then when he ran in the store, I went behind him and came in the store, yelled out, for 2 couples, right, a couple to freeze, and they're the store owner. And so they froze, and at the moment, my co-defendant fired two shot, to like behind the counter, right, into some bottles. And I think he fired a shot as a warning shot for the store owner to cooperate. And at that moment, when he fired a shot, I turned around to see where the gunfire was coming from. And at that moment, the lady who was there, she reached out and behind the counter and grabbed a hold of my weapon, my gun, and started yanking the gun from me. And so I was afraid that she might have possession of my weapon, so I yanked the gun back from her. And at that moment, I had my hand on the trigger and I discharged my firearm. And so the bullet, I think it went through her neck, killing her. And at the time, I didn't know that she passed away. I got my gun back. I took off running out the store. My co-defendant, he grabbed the money and he came after us. And then we started running. And then it wasn't till it's like several months later. I was in Michigan. And then I got a call from my brother. He said, hey, man, there's some detective looking for you. They say that you killed somebody at the store. And so I knew at the moment that, that this person died. And so I called my mom. I told her I'm coming back down. I'm gonna turn myself in. And so I drove back from Michigan all the way to Cali. I went to the police station with my parents and my brother. And then I told a detective what happened and why I'm here. And then they got me, and then they took me to juvenile hall, transferred me to San Jose. I ended up pleading guilty to second-degree murder with the use of firearms. So I ended up in prison as one of the youngest juvenile lifers in the system. I was 14 when I committed my crime, and at this point I was like 15 years old.
So just backing up a little, just a tad bit. Mm-hmm. So you were in Michigan when you found out that that the detective was looking for you, and you were 14 years old. Mm-hmm. And then you came back home. You basically shared I call it share your beans, but shared like, yeah, it was me, my family, and I want to turn myself in. Now, can you explain a little bit of why you turned yourself in? Was it because it's like, that
Yeah.
you didn't know that, just explaining that.
Yeah, I didn't want to run, right? I think like a part of me was like, first I didn't know she died. I mean, I heard, right? People have mentioned something, but I didn't really know for sure. So when I heard that the detectives were looking for me, I knew right away, and I didn't want to like run my life and just like, and not see my family and just be on a run, right? It's not a life I wanted for myself, and also I think I was also shocked by what that from the news, and because I mean, even in the gang, I realized that I never really want to hurt people like that, and just like I've been hurt my whole life, you know what I mean? So like that really hit me really hard. And then my dad even told me, he said, you should just run, and I can take you to Canada and then introduce you to my friends, and you will not have to worry about, I can come visit you, right? But I didn't want to do that, and so I convinced them that this is the best for me, and it's my choice. And so they honored it. They're like, you know what, that's what you want to do. But I think we argue for hours on this at this point, right? And I end up convincing that was the best choice. And so they brought me back, I drove back to California, and then they came and got me and took me to the police station. We had our last meal together with me, my brother, my mom, and my dad. And then, and then I ended up in juvenile hall, and obviously I pled guilty to second-degree murder, so I went through the whole system. I went through juvenile hall. I went to CYA, and at this point, like, because I took a plea bargain, right, and and there's a lot of like missing pieces throughout this whole story, but like, at my age, you don't really understand what's happening, like in the legal system, right? I didn't know what the whole 25 to life meant, even though my lawyer have tried to explain it to me, I didn't really understand what it really meant, right? What is 25 to life, and I didn't really speak English at the time. Like, I just barely, right, speak English and, barely learning, right? And I wasn't fluent in English or anything like that. And it's obviously, like, what I know is nothing, when you're using languages in the law, in the courts, right? Like, who knows at my age, like, those kind of languages. So I didn't really understand it fully. But I ended up pleading guilty to it. And then it didn't really hit me until I turned 18, because I went to CYA, right? And I went back to school, tried to get my degree and everything, and I actually was, when I was in CYA, I was involved in a program that one of the sergeant was also like the of the unit, right? I was in Preston, and he recruited me to run a gang program, and so got pretty successful actually. A lot of people showed up for the classes. I was working with them, and I was also going to school myself at this time. I think like through the whole process, I realized that I wanted an education, right? And I actually taught myself how to read. So one of the other stories that when I was in juvenile hall, before I was incarcerated, I was part of this program when I was younger called the Addison Y program in Stockton. And I had a mentor named Tom who would take me out, and he would take me out and would teach me how to sound out alphabet. So, and I never really like mastered it, right? But when I was in juvenile hall, I was sitting in my cell, and I needed to like write letters, because that's a way of communication, right? Like, you can't really call people all the time. So I wanted to write a letter to my family. I wanted to connect with my community. I want to write to my friends and stuff. And I had to learn how to read. And so I would pick up this book, and I still remember it's called The Monster by R.L. Stine. My first book. It was like 100-some pages, right? And I would look at the book, and I would just like sound out the alphabet, and I would try to make out the words. And then I did that over time. Like, it took me months, right, to read the whole book. But I would sound out words, and then I would, oh, that's what the word is. And then it makes sense, right? And then I put it into a sentence. And over time, I was able to read out the sentence, And then I did this over and over, for months. And then finally, I finished the book, and I was like, oh, that was a good story. So I went out and get another book, and I just kept that up. And that's how I taught myself how to read. So I never really like learned how to read traditionally. So a lot of stuff had to do with memories. So like even today, like my reading isn't like, it's more had to do with memorizing, because I have to decipher the sentence, right? And so now I'm like taking back what I've learned, the sound out letters and stuff, and putting it back into, in my brain so I can read other words, right? But that was my method. And so I went back to school, and then I was part of this gang program. And so the sergeant really liked me. He's like, man, he wanted to keep me in CYA. So he actually wrote letters and stuff to try to keep me there, but that didn't happen, I was charged as an adult, which means I was only going to be there until I was 18, right? Which I didn't really understand what all that meant until I hit 18, and then they shipped me to prison. So then it all hit me. Oh, life. That's what that meant. And I'm going to prison. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison. Because when I was waiting for the bus or the van with other juvenile offenders, also was being charged an adult and transferred to adult prison. You know, on our way out, it was like we were sitting there, and the guy who processed us out, the counselor or the officer, he's like, "Yeah, youngster, you're doing life. You're gonna go home to prison, and you're gonna spend the rest of your life in prison." And that's kind of like all hit me right there at that moment. Okay, that's what life meant. And so I end up in this adult prison, right? I end up in Tracy, doing the reception center. And normally, like, the way it works is that they put you in the reception center, they classify you, look at your background and stuff, you know, and then they put you in a prison where you should go based on your points, right? And your points is basically defined by your crime. And normally, if you have like a serious crime, you would start up with, you know, a higher level with, you know, bigger points, right? And fortunately for me, a lot of my points got dropped when I was in the youth authority until I was 18. So I spent like almost a year and a half in the youth authority. And so I ended up dropping some points. And I was like at the very end, of like 51 point, which is put me on level 3, right? And normally 52, you'd be at level 4. And that would have been a whole different story. But I was fortunate I was in the 51. But I remember like the experience of prison. My first introduction was I was on a yard, right? And it's all gated, like fences, right? Like dog fences. I don't know if you picture like what a dog cage look like. You put all those dog cage together, you know, but it's a bigger cage, right? And you put a human being in those cages. And so I was in the cage with like 20 other people, and I can see like all in different cages have 5 or 4, you know, people were all in these different cages on the yard. And I was standing there, and then the alarm went off, right? And if you ever hear an alarm in prison, it's the most nerve-wracking thing ever, right? It just, especially the first time, right? Because when you hear it loud in the siren, and then people are like on their knees, because that's part of the procedure. You have to go on your knees. And I was the first time in prison. So people are on their knees. Because I can see the nurses, people walking around, and they all just got on their knees. Well, not the nurses, but everyone around them got on their knees in blue. And all the officer would just run, right? They're all running towards these alarm somewhere, right? It's a big old commotion. And I realized it was a full-scale riot happening. So that was my first introduction to prison. And I was standing there, and then this white guy, bald-headed, looked like a biker, you know, got all his tattoo, you know, got a swastika in his face. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but you know, he was a skinhead. And the first time he showed me some empathy, he looked at me, he's like, "Hey, youngster, you're gonna be all right, man. You're gonna be all right." And I looked at him, and he's like, "You're gonna be all right, dude. Just, you know, you're gonna be okay." And I realized at that moment there was a lot of fear in my face, and that he, you know, he can see it, that there was a fear in my face, and I felt so like vulnerable. Right? I felt, you know, like so. I was afraid, you know. I think like at that moment, because you hear story about prison, right? You hear story about prison, coming to prison young. They, you know, people get raped, you know, people get abused, people get all kind of like violence happen to them. So at that moment, I realized, man, I made myself vulnerable, and I can never do that in prison. And so I told myself, I'm never gonna allow that to happen again. Like no one's gonna look at me like that again, right? So, you know, I put this, you know, you put all this face mask on you, right? So I built this toughness, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna be a gangster in prison. And so my first few years, you know, I got involved in prison politics, you know, and you don't understand what prison is. Prison has a very unique dynamic, meaning it's a very segregated community, right? It's on the yard, like all the blacks will hang out in one area, you know, and they'll have the Crip on one side and the Blood on one side, and you have all the skinhead hanging out one side, and all the Southern Hispanic hang out one side, and Northern Hispanic hang out one side, and all the like the Asian and the others all in different side, right, of the yard. And it's separated that way because of safety, and I think the administration created a separation for us because it's easier to divide us if we're fighting against each other. We don't really fight against the system, right? And we don't really see the system, how they really abuse us. But, you know, the yard is separated, which mean like you can't go to someone else's territory. Right, and so you can't really like socialize with another race. You can't really deal with another race, right? So you gotta stick with your own. And so, you know, I got involved in a lot of prison politics. And then the whole, when you're in politics, like they make you carry knives and stuff, right? Because that's part of the process, like you never know when it's your turn to like deal with violence, to enforce the prison code and, represent your car, right? We call it a car. We're basically the people you hang out with, like I was part of the Asian car because I'm Asian, right? And especially specifically like the Cambodian, the Laos, the Thai, the Hmong, and the Vietnam. I mean, and the Laotian all kind of hung together. The Minh. So Minh, Laos, Cambodian, Thai all kind of hang out together. But that's a whole different like section that more complicated to describe. But this is like sub-politic too behind it. But to keep it to the story, a little more shorter. But my life didn't really change. Like I was in prison. I'm going through this whole politics stuff. I was trying to survive prison basically. And I got really good at it. I got really good at surviving prison because I made a reputation for myself. People trusted me. Some people was afraid of me, and then, and I think I've been solid. They know like I was a down dude. Like something happened, I'm gonna show up. And I was a young stupid guy because people would use you for things like that, right? And I was fortunate too because there's older adults who really like me and they look out for me. They're like, we don't want you in those kind of like situation where you end up getting killed, right? So they would watch me all the time, and I would walk with them and like pay attention to the elders. They would teach me all prison politics and what not to do. So I was focused on that area, and then I end up, obviously education was still my thing. I wanted to learn as much as I can. So I didn't graduate at high school, right? Because I was like a few units away, right, from graduating. I got shipped out of CYA, so I when I got my GED, I think the first 3.5 months I studied, busted my butt, and got my GED. I ended up working in a chapel. And so when I ended up in the chapel, I met this Native American guy, right? Because I was responsible. I was the only person who was the porter, so I get to like clean up the chapel, and I get to help out with all the services. So like all the Islamic services, the Christian services, the Native American, the Buddhist service. So all these like faith group would ask me to help out, so I would help everybody out, prepare them for the services and stuff. And so one of the Native American clerk at the time, a guy named Chui, Wintu, actually. I still remember him because he was a big-ass dude, right? Big old guy, right? Long hair, was like massive guy. And he came to me, and he was like the most kind person that you can ever meet, right, in prison. It was like, dude is a good dude, right? And he started talking to me, and I started talking with him. We shared about our culture, where it came from. And then, like Cambodian have a very indigenous side of us before Buddhism came. And so we started talking about that area, right? Because at this point, I was reading all kinds of books. So I was like learning a lot about my own history and learning a lot about the world. And so we started talking about all these stuff we know, right? And our education and the book we read. And I bonded with him very deeply. And so one day he invited me to do a spotlight ceremony. And so I went with him. And, because like in prison, people used to have this idea, like especially if you do religious service with the Native American, you have to come in with a clean, pure mind. So you can't be drinking, you can't be smoking weed, like you can't have all these bad thoughts, right? And so and the ceremony is run every week, and so I had to clean myself. It was explained to me, you better make sure you come in there clean, good thoughts and stuff, right? So I would meditate and get myself ready, and then mentally and physically, right? And so I didn't because. Contrary to what people think, in prison you can find drug easy, you can find alcohol and stuff easy. And my friend would always party, and so we would always, I would always drink with them. So at this point, I was like, I can't drink with you guys. I got to stay clean for a whole week, prior to even coming to the ceremony. So I stopped drinking, and then I went to the ceremony, and when I was in the ceremony, and I didn't drink that much. Just I wanted to be clear. I tried to do this for like maybe a year, right? Just hanging out with my friend playing cards. And that was a new thing. They would just make Pruno out of like fruits, fermented fruit, and then they turned into alcohol, and we would out there and we would drink and, have fun to pass time, right? But at this point I was like exploring different things in my life, right? And I had an opportunity to do something very profound and deep. And so this ceremony I joined, Finally, I joined the ceremony, and like the Native American, they have this thing called an ipi, which is a dome, right? It represents Mother Earth. And when you're in an ipi, they bring in all the elements: the fire, the wind, the water, right? And every single thing has its own representation. Like the rocks is your ancestor, they've been down the longest. And the fire, like it heats up the stone, and it brings all these spirit and all these medicine in there, right? And they bring the hot rocks in, and the water would represent the breath of grandfather, which is creator. And so we sit in this dark place, who like being in the womb of Mother Earth, and you bring all this element in there. And we have a person who runs the sweat. He's a sweat leader. And he's responsible for all of us, right? Our safety, because it's hot in there. I mean, you can get up to 170 degrees, right? It's hot steam, right? It's always, and if you're not careful, you can hurt people. And if you're not careful, you can hurt yourself too. So there was like, they have to explain everything to you about the ceremony so you understand what to do, how to breathe, how to get cool and all that stuff, right? Like going close to the ground, because the earth, you're closer to the earth, you can breathe better, and all the steam and stuff on the top of you, right? And so the point is that I came to the ceremony because it's a purification ceremony, right? The idea is that you can sit there, and it's dark for a reason, and the reason it's dark is because it's between you and your creator. No one can see you, right? And when the sweat leader poured the water into the rocks, the hot steam would just cleanse your body physically. Like you sweat all these toxins out of your body, but like spiritually, like you can feel the steam, the breath of grandfather, like washing away all your anxiety, all the way your pain, all the way your sin. Like the idea you give up those stuff you carry that holds you down spiritually to creator, right? And so I sat there with all these guilt, all this shame, all this pain throughout my childhood, and I just connected with creator at the moment. I just released all of it, right? And I sent it out with those steam, and when the water just washed my body, I could feel all those stuff I held for all these years, get washed away, right, with the trauma and everything. And so I came out of that ceremony, at 4 rounds, because they open the flap every like half hour or so for air, and then they bring more rocks in, right? And so surprisingly enough, most beginner don't last 3 rounds, right? They would just fall out on the second round. But I made it to all 4. And I came out of there feeling like a new person. I felt like I let go of everything, right? And so I felt a new person. It was like the most profound, most spiritual, amazing thing ever in my life. And then at that moment, I realized this is my life. This is what I want to do. This is the walk I want to take, And I was clean, right? I was clean. I was sober. I was fresh in my mind. I felt powerful, right? I felt healed. I felt really good. It's hard to describe what the feeling is, but I know like this is the beginning of my life where I can look at myself without shame. And it's a thought that was, right, like just a feeling at the moment. But my real work didn't start until, because I'm now part of the spiritual circle. They have like programs in there, and one of the programs we have is called the Red Road Program and the White Bison Program, which is a program that run by Native American for sobriety, 12-step program process. But they did a lot of process group, a lot of healing, a lot of work with self, right, and like a restorative kind of concept and work. And so I was in this group, right, in the chapel, and this is where my life changed completely. And I am today because of that moment, right? I was in a room in a chapel in a circle with 8 men, right, and they had shared deeply about their experience in life, the childhood, how to get to prison, and these guys have been in prison for more than 2-3 decades. They're like a veteran. They opened up prison, right? And at least for us, like for the for the others and for the Native American. And so they're sitting in there and they're like sharing their life story and what they've been through and all the trauma they had. And people were like crying really deeply. They were being very vulnerable. And it was like an amazing thing because I'm in prison, I've never seen a man cry, openly like that, right? And there's so much vulnerability. But it was really fascinating. It was really like eye-opening to me. It's also encouraging too, right, to see that kind of vulnerability in men. But I'm sitting there, and then one of my facilitator, he shared like how he lost his 2 daughters to crime, and I can never forget his face. Like he started crying, he was shaking, And somehow, I don't know what sparked this memory or this thought, but I started to realize like I caused the same pain, to the people I've harmed in my life, right? Specifically, the family of the store owner that I killed. And I just started feeling overwhelming shame, guilt. And I saw my body started shaking, I started crying. And I realized at that moment, that same pain was caused to somebody else. I caused the same pain. And I felt, it's really hard to describe, but I felt overwhelmed. I felt like I could just flop down and just die, right? Like it was the most heart-wrenching thing I ever experienced. And at that moment, I told myself, I'm never gonna let that happen again to anyone around me. So I made a pledge to myself. I'm gonna walk a different path. I started really doing a lot of self-reflection, right? And so I walked away from gangs. I almost started a full-scale riot, walking away from the gangs, walking away from the from the yard and all that stuff. Because a lot of my homeboys, they're like, man, you only hang out with Asians, you gotta stay here.
So like your transition from, can you tease that out a little bit more?
Yeah, because I didn't want to be like on the yard every day, playing politics, guarding the table, ready for a fight any moment, right? Getting involved in the drug, making money on the yard, all that stuff, selling drugs. I didn't want to do none of that. For me, anything that causes harms, I don't want to do it. If I'm cornered and I'm forced to fight, I will do that, right? And so, but I walked away from it, I walked away from all that. And that was a path. That wasn't my moment, right? The moment that I pledged to myself. I mean, now I wouldn't, someone trying to beat me up, I'm going to run. But, like in prison, it's steps to me. Like, everything was a step. But my first step was like pledging my life to turn my life around, to give up all of that stuff, right? So I walked away from the gang and I went back to school. I enrolled in college classes. I went and got my trades. I went to work at PIA. I left the kitchen. At this time, I was in the chapel. I went to the kitchen and I started doing a lot of volunteer work and got a job at the kitchen because kitchen pay you more, right? So, and when I say pay you more, I'm talking about like 30 cents an hour.
I was going to ask that, but I was just like, pay more. What does that mean? But you got it.
Penny wages, right? Like,
Yeah.
But and that's the thing, like prison don't pay, it's slavery labor, right?
Yes.
It's like people work in the yard all day long for 8 cents an hour. I'm in the kitchen and I bust my butt all day long. I get about 30 cents an hour, right? 35 cents an hour. I don't remember what it was, but it was like pennies.
Before you go to that story, but I wanted to, on your transition, which was sounds to me very profound statement, not just with your words, but with your mind and your body, that really what you were doing, like with the gangs, was so profound that it just caused, it sounded like mayhem, that no one liked. I'm like, what? Nah, bruh, And I hope, well, we get to the story, that maybe that sparks other people to change. Like, it's okay to have a sound changed mind. And, if you're in the middle of something that's really, it sounds like you were like really deep in it.
Yeah, I think my reflection was that I earned myself in a gang. I have to earn it, I earned myself to be in a gang. So I have to earn myself to get out of the gang. So the question is like, are you willing to make the sacrifice? Because I really sacrificed my body getting jumped in. So sacrificing my body to get back out was a part of, mentally that's how I was thinking, right? I'm like, it's just part of the hardship of coming out. And at this point, my whole life has been hardship, right? So I'm used to it. Like everything has a price. Life is hard and you're always gonna have to go through it no matter what, right? You just gotta keep pushing and hold on and don't ever give up. And so I made a commitment right at the moment. I'm gonna do something better, I'm gonna make some changes. I'm gonna try to give back to my community. I wanna honor the folks I've harmed by doing something better for my community. And so when I was younger, I always wanted to be a coach because coaches always, the people who've been in my life or people who taught me sports and stuff, right? The coach. And there's a positive role model in my mind. I never really see a role model like what I see now with, as an adult, like a new, all my colleagues in APC and people I work with in the faith movement for human integrity and the folks in Syria, the Center for Empowering Refugees and Immigrants. And those are the organizations I'm talking about, but there's also like hundreds of other organizations that I met through my journey, right, of rehabilitation. But I think like at the time, coach was what I see. They were the people who get you out of trouble, right, keep you out of gangs and stuff. But I didn't walk that life because the circumstance didn't allow me to do that, right? But at the moment, I realized, you know what? To correct my wrong, I have to give back, to my community. I have to do something to better my community, and I have to take the step because I'm responsible. I took part in destroying it, right, and hurting people. So I like, you know what? I've been hurt my whole life, and I'm hurt other people. Now it's time for me to take a different path, maybe help heal my community instead, And so I left the gang. I went back to school. I got my trades, and then through my work, right, my counselor. And this happened during our time of the realignment. Like CDCR was doing some budget changes, moving people out and just transitioning a lot of stuff. And then my counselor came to me. She was like, "We got to transfer you out." Because at this point I was level 2 point. I've been in prison for many years now. And she said, "You're level 2 points. We can't keep you here anymore. We got to move you out. You choose where you want to go." And
so level 2 means like a lower
level,
like facility. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, like level 4, the higher level. That's where a lot of the prison violence has happened because people have higher level. They've been there for more violent points. They have their lifer. They're never getting home. So there's not a lot of hope, right? Not to look forward to. So a lot of violence happen in prison, level 4, because for small things, smaller disrespect. You step on someone's shoes, they will kill you. Simply because that's the way the environment is, right? It's a very oppressive environment, and everyone is against each other, right? So there's more violence happening, and level 3 is more like in between, right? It's like it's still violence and stuff, but people have less, there's more program than level 4, right? And then the level 2 has even more program, and less violence. So at this point, I'm already level 2, and I can go to different prison because they're moving people out. And so my counselor asked me to pick up a place. And I was like, I want to go to Soledad because I hear they have a good PIA, which is Prison Industry Authority. And I was working for the prison at this time. I was a welder, and I was building dump trucks and stuff, snow plows, and a bunch of things. I got certified at this point to be a welder, so I like doing it, right? And I wanted to go there, but my counselor like, nah, based on your programming, based on you're in a college program and all that, you should go to San Quentin. I was like, why San Quentin? She said, because you can thank me later. Right? I didn't know what San Quentin is, but I ended up in San Quentin because of her. And she's, they have an on-campus college program there. So I went enrolled in the college program. I got involved in all these, restorative justice, because I wanted, at this point, I was already doing mentor stuff, work on the yard with people. And, now I'm in San Quentin, and I see all these programs happening, right? People in blue, the folks who's incarcerated, facilitating program, they're counselor, and they're certified by the state. And they're providing addiction recovery counseling kind of work, and they're doing all this work, and they're the most amazing experience because I never thought that I would see an inmate, right, teach a class, to a room full of 100 people. Literally, these people are teaching class. And I didn't imagine ever seeing stuff like that, right? So San Quentin really opened my eyes, and I realized while I'm here, the possibility is limitless. I could get an education, I could give back to my community, I can do all kinds of stuff, right? And so I started enrolling in everything I can. I went to the college program. I got involved in other programs that did a lot of restorative justice work, and so while I was doing this journey, I wanted, I wanted to give back to youth, right? So I ended up in the Squire program, and I still go back to San Quentin today to teach class and work with the kids, right? And that was my way of giving back, because the youth was, I grew up without any role models, right, and any support. So I wanted to be a different person for them, and so I got involved in the Squire program, and then over time I started getting involved with other programs, and then I realized there's a need for juvenile lifers specifically. We needed people because we have very unique experience, right? And I got involved with a bunch of men inside, and I won't tell you the whole story on that one, but we ended up creating a first juvenile lifer group in prison ever, right? And through our work, through our juvenile lifer, we were able to connect with people like Human Rights Watch, with people from also advocates from outside will come in and work with us, and we end up creating juvenile bills like SB 260, 261, which helps people here, right? When you're younger, and Anu can tell you more about that. But
yeah, I can give some context maybe on what PJ. So at this point, even though PJ had done all this amazing work and had a personal transformation, there was no hope of really getting out of prison. And so for many decades, California was passing really tough on crimes. There's this whole idea of super predator children. And so California kept dropping the minimum age to send children to prison for life lower and lower until, PJ was being sent at 14 to life in prison. And California ended up with the largest prison population in the country, one of the largest prison populations in the state. And it was largely being driven by not like minor offenses, but by really harsh sentencing for more serious offenses. And, about a third of people in California prisons are serving life. And governors at the time, Schwarzenegger, were basically denying parole to everyone. So a life sentence meant you die in prison. And even if you were 14 or 15, you still would have to do 25 years before even eligible to go to a parole board, where the likelihood of getting granted parole was like less than 10%. And then still you had to get the governor to agree with that decision, and he would just reject everyone. And so what PJ is talking about was the first attempt to sort of change that and give people a shot at actually getting parole.
Yeah, and it was really weird dynamic because so the group I'm talking about is called KitKat, right? We form a juvenile life group called KitKat. And it started out by a guy named Tung Nguyen, who got all of us together on a yard. And part of his motivation was he wanted to reach out to Son Lee Lin Yi, because Lee Lin Yi at the time was really an advocate for juvenile reform, right? And he made his statement saying that, juvenile have the highest capacity for rehabilitation, right? And so and it stuck with everyone, right? And who's youth offender. And at this point, Tung was going to the board and he would get denied from the parole board all the time, every time he go. And other youth offender has also been denied parole board too, right? And they denied us simply because we lack life experience, which makes us more dangerous. That's what they would tell us. They would say, because you lack life experience, it makes you more dangerous, right? You're more likely to reoffend. So our age would work against us, right? And so Tung wanted to change that. He wanted to change that whole idea. So the idea is that we can reach out to Senator Lin Yi, let him know that there's another side to us. Like people in San Quentin at this point have done many programs, and they're remarkable. They're artists, they're teachers, they're, poet, you name it, right? Like athlete, and they have transformed their life, and they have so much value to give back to the community, and they're not the person who committed their crime, and they wanted to show that to society, right, and really echo that, and so they want to share that with Lin Yi, and we actually ended up inviting him to come over with us to a symposium, and he came in with a lot of other advocates like Human Rights Watch, and they brought other advocates as well. So we started collaborating, right, and then over time, this group grew, right. We grew into something else other than our main objective. We became an actual program where we provide life skills to other juvenile lifers. We have a support group where juvenile lifers can talk about their crime and heal from their trauma, right? We offer a first step curriculum which focuses on identity, masculinity, empathy, emotional intelligence, all these other dynamic that for kids our age didn't get when we were going through the prison system, right? And we have all this trauma that never healed from. So we started providing it to the general population. And this work, so I share that to say this work is ongoing, and it's a platform that really changed all of our lives, right? Especially for the youth offenders. And through this whole process, and this is kind of like the blessing that I have, because you rarely see people come home, on the first initial hearing. But because of SB 260, 261, which is the bill that we helped push out, passes, I was able to get found suitable on my first hearing. And the parole board really said, we see you're an asset to the community. We'll send you home. So I ended up getting out. Right?
So all that work, I'm just feeling happy. Sorry.
That was like
go ahead.
That was like the, so here's the thing, right? It's like when I started doing programming and stuff,
right.
I just wanted to give back to my community, and I wanted to be a different person. The idea of freedom never existed because life would never go home, like Anoop said. That doesn't happen. Right, so the thought of even going home never crossed my mind. I wanted to be a different person, but then when as stuff are happening and things are changing, I realized I could go home, and I didn't want to just go to board and get found suitable. I wanted to figure out how I'm going to be successful when I get out. You know, because I've been in prison my whole life. I like all this stuff, right? So I try to get involved in everything. I try to learn all I can, like computer and stuff. So I started learning how to do coding. I started, how to operate Microsoft Office. I started, I took on jobs, like clerk jobs, to give me opportunity and access to computers so I can get all these skills, right? And those skills helped me also like organize, program and stuff, doing movement sheet. So I was really like, I did a lot with the administration. Like they liked me because one, I didn't take advantage of my position, but of access to all these programs, and I would literally like write memos and stuff for all the program in the prison. So I was involved in like 72 other programs, just helping out, on the side, and while creating my own program. And so one of the big programs that I'm very proud of and I've been a part of, which is still part of me today, is the Roots program, which is the first ethnic study program, in the prison system. Right, and this the history of it is that it started with these three individuals. We call them the San Quentin Three, right? It's Mike Knoll, Eddie Zhang, Enrico Romerio, right? These three individuals wanted to start an ethnic study program to be offered in a university, right? And the way the administration responded to them was that they put them in solitary confinement and then shipped them out to a different prison. Right, and that's how they responded to him. Like, they saw him as a threat, right? But Eddie and the other two San Quentin 3 would write to the community outside, and like activists like Yuro Kuchiyama, she's a civil rights activist, right? Like main opponent like of who we are today. Like she actually wrote back and visited Eddie and met with them, and students like from UC Davis would come visit Eddie, and like our organization, the Asian Prison Support Committee, came from all volunteer program, started to visit folks in prison, right? And then over time, we started bringing people at home, and we started hiring staff. Like Eddie was one of the first staff who was formerly incarcerated with APSC, right? And Eddie came back, so it would start our first, ethics study. And the idea is like, no history, no self, right? You don't know your history, you don't know yourself, right? So, we ran our first Roots program and graduated. And like this is profound to me as an API person. It's very profound, right? Because when I went to San Quentin and I see all these facilitator, like these people are like operating at a level like beyond my imagination, right? Like what they can do, their knowledge and their insight was amazing. But I don't see a lot of API community member doing it. Like I rarely see Asian teach classes, right? So the idea, like one or two, I can name like a couple people in the prison at the time that can do it, that actually does it, right? But I didn't see so many. But the idea for the Roots program, like we not only like help folks heal and understand their culture and history and their background, but build leadership, right? And for us, it's a big success because a lot of the Roots graduates have come home, and a lot of them who came home actually end up facilitating other classes, right? So we have more Asian facilitator, more, Pacific Islander facilitator, right? In other areas in the prison. So and when I go back today, there's like diversity, right, everywhere. So it was a big accomplishment for us, right, to see that. And not to mention, like when I go to San Quentin's, I see a few Roots guys that is left on the way home, but we got almost everybody home. And so that was a big accomplishment, right? People are coming home, back to the community and giving back. They're working in Oakland as ambassadors. They're running their own organization, having their own businesses, and they're working, helping the youth and stuff on the street, right? And so I think like there's a lot of success story for that, right? And I was really proud, to see that happen and to see it, potentially going to grow. We're going to grow it, right?
And impactful.
It's very important.
And transformational and intentional.
Yes.
Not just like, I'm just doing the work to get numbers. It's like, no, like it hits here, it hits here. Because once you have these two connected, it's, heart and mind. It's nothing but just like straight ahead, full forward. And you could see just in your programming, like it's in the programming that you're describing, which is... It's empowering, right? I mean, it's like, woo, where do I sign up?
I would encourage like people who are listening, like to actually, Google us, Google APSC, look at our work, like actually go and look at the Roots graduation, and see what's like, right, for us, And I think like, for me, it's empowering, I like to empower my community. One of the other program I was involved in is called Brothers Keeper, right? I was a counselor. I was a rape crisis counselor on the yard, helping people to go to crisis, right? Losing family members, getting parole denial, could be rape victims, and I did counseling work with them, right? And one of the thing that I've learned is that, like, you cannot fix people's problem for them, right? It doesn't really work that way, right? You can empower people to take, to be their own advocate, and I think that's the most powerful thing you could do for somebody, because I think, like, people in crisis tend to forget their power and who they are, right? And so I've learned that when you give people the strength, the hope, right, and just empower them, they can do all kinds of stuff, right? There's no limit. So I think, like, when I think about a program like Roots, it's empowering, It's empowering to know my history, to learn where my ancestors come from, to know my roots, like, it's empowering to understand, like, the journey they went through, the hardship, the sacrifices, right? And I think it translates to my own personal experience. Like, I used to hate my dad growing up, right? Because he wasn't there. I was always thinking, oh, my dad abandoned us, I mean? As an adult, it took me some time to realize, as I was doing this work, that my dad did the best he could, what he had, and he didn't have much. He didn't abandon us. He had his own trauma, right? And what he did was that he isolated himself so that the shame and the what he's going through doesn't affect us, right? At least to his mind, that's what he thought, even though I wish he was around. So it was, for me, it was an eye-opening to really reframe that experience, right? To really see from his light, from a different perspective, right? And it was empowering to me to know that, that I could also heal from that too, right? Knowing what he went through. And appreciate his sacrifices to get me to United States. I mean, he went through a lot of stuff, right, to get us here. And so for me, I think, like, knowing all these stuff, helps me, right, become a better person. Like, it really shapes me, right, and gives me a sense of, foundation. And actually helps me. So when I got out of prison, from San Quentin, when I got found suitable, they paroled me a little earlier. Right? Normally they put you 150 days, but I didn't stay 150 days after my suitability. And I found out like 3 months before I was on my way out, right? And I was saying goodbye to people, like just really closing all the ties. And I have this aspiration, okay, I'm a parole to San Francisco. I have a scholarship. And, I'm going to go, I have job offers. I have all these things I'm going to be doing. And then my counselor called me in and said, I just want you to know ICE might come pick you up. I'm like, wait, what do you mean they're going to come pick me up? He said that you have immigration hold. And I was hoping that they didn't come pick. So this time I knew, right? I knew, because this has happened. I'm not the first one, right? Like, but I've mentally trying to prepare myself, right? And I was like, okay.
Wait, but didn't you say you were hi? Okay.
So I'm gonna let Anoop explain this part, right?
Okay, so, you're gonna have to explain that, because we got to pause for 2.5 seconds, sir.
Okay.
But what happened? What happened, Anoop? What happened in this process? Because that don't make no sense. Because you came to this country, you green card, asylum, the whole shebang, and then ICE.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it confuses everyone. Mm-hmm. But so PJ was a refugee and then a lawful permanent resident. And people hear lawful permanent resident, it's permanent, right? But, during the period where the U.S. was really getting tough on crime in the 90s, they were passing harsher and harsher laws. So this one law passed in 1996 that was signed by Bill Clinton when he was running for re-election, expanded deportation grounds, and it built our modern immigration detention system. So it funneled hundreds of millions of dollars into building more detention centers, and expanded who they can deport. And so it created this category of people called aggravated felons. And that could be anyone who's not a citizen, even if you're a refugee, even if you're a permanent resident, even if you've been here since you're 1 week old, and subject you to mandatory deportation if you have any one of a long list of criminal convictions, including convictions like PJ's. And it didn't matter how old you were, didn't matter how long you'd been here, didn't matter if you had no ties to the country they're reporting you to, it didn't matter how much evidence of rehabilitation was. It made deportation virtually mandatory. And then at the same time, the California prison system around the same time in the 90s, it was a time of really intense xenophobia in California. And so they created a policy that they were going to do everything they can to deport anyone in their custody who's not a citizen. So the California prison system set up all these programs to sort of identify, profile people who might not be a citizen and actively report them to ICE. And those policies remain in place today. or the California prison system, when anyone enters the U.S. Prison system and says they're not born in the U.S. or looks like they're not might be born in the U.S. to the prison staff, or maybe they speak with an accent, immediately they pick up the phone and they call ICE and report the person. Then what they do is, throughout the person's time in prison, anytime they move prisons, if a court orders them released, if they're granted parole, their first call is not to tell the person, hey, the governor says you should be released. Their first call is to ICE. And then what they do is they adjust the person's release date to a time they know ICE is going to be there, and then hand them off to ICE. And so today in California, the biggest source of deportations is actually the California prison system, even though California, prides itself as being a sanctuary state. So that's sort of the situation PJ found himself in as he was getting ready to parole prison after decades.
And can you imagine, like
you did all this work.
All this work.
I mean, you're still doing this work. Don't get me wrong, people. Like, you're still doing the work.
I mean, because it's mind-boggling, right? Because like mentally, I was preparing myself for a different place, right? I didn't expect, to be at ICE detention, right? So like, for one, I was so stressed out. Like, all my free, like, like people tell you this when you're coming home, at least you think you're coming home, like, you have all kinds of emotion, feelings. It's just the closer you get, the more it become intense, right? Like I didn't sleep for like 2 days. You know what I mean? Like I was just excited. I was afraid. It's all kinds of stuff is happening. Right? I have all this ball of emotion just going all over the place. Right? I couldn't really sleep. Like I doze in and out, here and there, right? So it's like trying to stay awake. And so on the day of my release, the guy come over. I'm already up. I have a cup of coffee and I'm all my stuff packed. I didn't say goodbye to everybody I cared about. Who's in my unit, and it was like ready to go out, right? And then I'm sitting there, and the guy walked me. Right? He opened the door. He walks me down, took me to R&R, which is shipping and receiving, right? Where they bring people in and send people out. And they put me in this holding tank, right? And in my mind, like I'm thinking, ICE, please don't show up. Please don't show up, right? And so like. And then I hear the phone call. So I'm listening to every phone call that comes in, they pick up. It's not even me, right? He's just calling, but I'm listening, right? Waiting for the anticipation. And then the guy put me in another cell. He's like, yeah, you're going to wait here. And then, like at this point, like I did so much program. A lot of officers were really good with me. So they would come over, like say, actually gave me a hug. Like, man, I'm proud of you. All the best of luck. And then I'm feeling depressed because I'm like, at this point, I'm tired. I haven't really slept. And then I know that I should get me in the moment, you don't even know, right? And so, sure enough, they showed up, right? They showed up, and they're like knocking on the door, asking me to take all my property out. So I dropped my property in there. They're like, I need you to take your belt off. So I'm like, oh man, I just put these street clothes on. Now I got to take it back off, And so like, I was happy, even putting the clothes on, like the ritual of putting clothes on, that's not in prison stuff, like, it makes you really happy, right, in some way, right? So I'm like, I take it back off. So I'm so disappointed, and I'm taking all my clothes off, my belt off. It's like, no, you can't have that shoes either. You gotta take it off, no strings. So take the shoes off, right? Put something else on, and then the guy's like, get on the wall, and then I got on the wall. This is normal in prison, right? CO does it to you all the time to put you on the wall and strip you and all that. So I'm like, here we go again. So I got on the wall, and the guy shackles me from my waist, my hands, my feet, right? And he threw me in this dog cage van. I call it dog cage van because that van is like a dog cage. If you see it, you know it. It's like metal everywhere, expanded metal on the window, and like the seat belt doesn't work, so you have this metal seat. You go in there, and I'm actually bumped my head a few times when he was driving because I was just rocking back and forth in there, right? And I was tired, and I just hit myself a few times.
Wait a second. So it's like you was in prison to go to like transition to like, it was like this brief moment of and then like release, or to transition to like a whole different another experience. How's like those emotions?
I never got out, so it's like, I mean, at this point I was like exhausted emotionally, like I'm just, like, damn, again, I'm crushed, I'm heartbroken, I'm afraid, like I'm angry, like all these stuff just like hits you all at one time, right? And there's sadness involved, and I'm just, and then I'm like, where am I going, And so now like the thought of being deported all kicked in, like, okay, another life sentence, I'm gonna die, right? And so here's the idea, right? Is that they're deporting me back to Cambodia. I wasn't even born in Cambodia. I was born in Thailand, right, in a refugee camp. So at this point, I went to an ICE facility in San Francisco. They processed me. I was in this kennel, dog kennel for I don't know, almost an hour to get to San Francisco, and then they put me in this holding tank, and my whole life just crashed. I just sat down, I just cried, and just like, I don't know what I was thinking at the time. It was like I was overwhelmed, and I was tired, and then I end up in the county jail, ICE facility, contracted, and I'll end up saying more about that. But I end up in so the way I remember this experience was that after they processed me and everything, the guy asked me, like, do you want to fight your case? I said, yes. Are you sure? You can just sign here and we deport you. I said, no, I'm going to fight my case. So I'm skipping forward a lot of detail, but I decided, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to fight my case.
And how long ago was that?
This,
or like, between today and when it started?
Oh, so I came out of San Quentin in November 23rd, 2016. That's when ICE picked me up, the same day. And I spent a year and a half in the ICE detention fighting my case. And I can tell you, people who have been in ICE doesn't understand this, but a year and a half in ICE was worse than the 19 and a half years I went in prison. It was worse.
Just what you described, like the transition. I'm trying not to cry. I don't see no tissue, but that sounds. I don't want to say painful, but like I don't know if you ever felt like I felt like a depression hole. That's what the experience, like what it seems like it was like this hole you can't get out of, like that. That's what it felt like when you explained it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I met PJ for the first time at San Quentin in 2015, maybe through the Roots program. And I was a volunteer at the APSC. I was a lawyer at another nonprofit. And PJ was like a celebrity at San Quentin. Everyone knew him on the yard. All the staff knew him. PJ was running like so many programs. He was someone just like so full of life and source of life for everyone around him. And so PJ got transferred to a county jail in rural Sacramento. That contract is based to ICE, and that place is horrific. That place is a dungeon. There's no light. And I think what's so hard about time in ICE is, one, the conditions. You go from a place where you have community, you have programs, you're busy, to you're just in lockdown in the cell with no windows, no natural light. And I think the other thing is hopelessness. I mean, when you're doing a life sentence, there's still some glimmer of hope of this is an outdate or I'll go to board. In ICE, you don't know. Like, people spend years and years, sometimes decades in ICE, and there's no sort of end in sight and mentally for you. And, I think what we all saw with PJ in the time he was in ICE was sort of that life that was just so infectious with him when he was in prison, just sort of fading away. And, I know PJ got really pale. He looked like really white because had not been out in the sun for a really long time. And the Sacramento County Jail, we'd visit PJ, and there was no contact visits. So we'd visit through thick plexiglass and bars, couldn't shake hands, shouldn't touch. And so it just sort of like everything in there just sort of drains you. And the time that PJ paroled, November 2016, was a couple of weeks after Donald Trump got elected, which is just a really horrific time to be fighting deportation because things went from bad to incredibly worse. So Trump took office when PJ had been in detention for a few months, and one of the first things they did was start ramping up pressure on Cambodia to take people for deportation, even if they hadn't been born there, and accept more and more refugees for deportation. And the U.S. can't deport people to a country unless that country is willing to accept them. And historically, Cambodia had been like, you're asking us to send us people here who are not born here. We have no record of them being born here. They grew up in the U.S. They're not Cambodian citizens. So the Trump administration started ramping up diplomatic pressure, putting visa sanctions on Cambodia. And then I remember October 2017, Cambodia finally buckled and said, okay, we'll take people. And ICE just went out in the community. There was a 2-week period in October 2017 where they arrested close to 100 people in the community. It was about 5 times larger than any ICE raid we'd ever seen targeting the Cambodian community. And they all got sent to the Sacramento County Jail where PJ was. And it was like 24 Cambodian people had been picked up in California in the same pot as PJ. And I think, that time was just really hard. We were seeing mass deportations to Cambodia. But PJ also was a huge source of inspiration and light for us, even though he was in a really hard place. And PJ was supporting a lot of the other Cambodian folks who were in detention and supporting us also, attorney. We were overwhelmed and exhausted, but talking to PJ really helped sort of ground us. And PJ also was supporting other folks who were fighting deportation, convincing them to keep fighting. And a lot of those folks ended up fighting and winning. They're today home and have families and have children that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And it was just really life-changing that PJ was there supporting them, even though he was in a really dark place. And then also one of our other staff members, Nia Norn, who's also a Cambodian lifer, was in another detention center in a county jail a couple hours away. And she and PJ started writing each other as they were both fighting deportation and supporting each other and forming a really beautiful friendship and relationship. And so we were able to find some light and support from PJ, and while we also supported him, and he was going through a really hard time.
Yeah, I wouldn't make it if I didn't have all those community support and those constant reminder, you're not alone, Because this time I wanted to give up. This my body's still screwed up today from being in an ICE detention center, right? Because the lack of I have an internal alarm clock. 5:30 in the morning, I wake up. It doesn't matter if I'm tired. I got 2 hours sleep. I wake up every morning at 5:30, right? And that was a routine for me since I was a kid. I've been doing that forever, right? And I was in that detention center. It was like sleep deprivation, right? It'll break you down mentally. Like these officer, one, they're the sheriff, right? They're not trained to deal with detainees because ICE has its own little expectation. You have to treat people humane and all that stuff, right? But the sheriff would tell us, dude, we don't know how to deal with you guys. I'm not an ICE, employee. You're in the county jail. You're in my house, So they treat us like we're in the county without the privileges, without the other stuff that the county would get because we're contracted, right? We don't get to come outside and do what we do. So I remember first day, right? I remember I told you I'm exhausted at this point, right? I came to this facility. I'm not sleeping for more than 2 days, right? So at this point I haven't slept in 3.5 days. So I came to this unit as a lifer. The worst thing you could do to a lifer who live in a cell, for all these years is to put him in an open dorm. Right? The guy told me to go outside, right? I'm walking into this dorm. He popped this, metal door open, and it's a yard outside, that metal screen on the top, and they have beds out there everywhere, right? He said, "Go pick one up this bed. Just pick one, any one." I look out there and crawling with spiders, just bugs all over it and stuff, right? It's all stained. I don't know what the stain it is, pee stain and all kind of stuff. I picked the bed out. They handed me, a blanket and a sheet. That's it, right? And then he tossed me into this dorm with 79 other people in there. It was chaos, and I was just so exhausted. I was so tired. I needed to sleep, right? I didn't even think straight, At this point, I don't know what I've done in the last 3 days, right? I just so tired, and all I wanted was to lay down and sleep. So the guy said, pick a bed, right there up on the top. So I dragged the bed in there. Unfortunately, there's other people who's in the facility doing long time ICE than I did, and this community try to help each other the best they can. So, ironically, the facility doesn't give you disinfectant and stuff, because in prison they give you disinfectant and stuff, right? You can go and clean your cell and all that stuff. They don't give you nothing. So these people would save, they gave us this razor where you can 2 razor and you rotate, you share with the whole unit, right? And they have this this blue liquid disinfectant thing that to disinfect the clipper after you shave, you gotta toss those things in there to get disinfected, right? And you clean up. They would save those so that they can clean the bed. So the moment I get in there, right, these guys, I didn't know what they were doing. They just took my bed, right? So I'm okay, whatever. And then they took my bed and they started cleaning it up with this blue thing. So they were disinfecting my bed because this is a process, right, for everyone. We all went through it. So they knew the routine. They knew what needed to be done, right? So they got that, and then I jumped on the bed. I was just so tired, I fell asleep, right? And then when I woke up, it was just like, all hit me all at one time, right? Where I was at, on the wall, and people was, and the thing is, like, none of these people have done time. Most of the people have not done time. Their crime is they don't have documents, right? So for small stuff, big stuff, they all in the same unit. And so a lot of these dudes doesn't know how to do time, and there's no boundary. There's no, like I grew up in a structural facility where like prison politic, right? Like I learned it when I was young and growing up in prison. So they have none. And so what happened is it created a really bad environment. People were getting into fights. People were like going crazy because they're stressed out from their, from being locked up for so long, and they miss their family, and their lawyer is just like, and that's another whole different thing. Is like a lot of the lawyers, just immigration attorneys, just taking their money, not really, preparing them their client. And then I was so dumbstruck at how many attorneys didn't know how to help the client prepare for bond hearing. Like as a person who went to board, I had to prepare myself, right, and learn how to put stuff together in order to communicate who I am today as a person, do all this documentation, right? And the attorney wasn't doing that. So people were just losing their cases left and right. And there was so much stress, so much chaos. It was just like, you feel all in the building, right? And then when I talk about sleep deprivation, these guards would just slam the door every hour on hour, all night. And if you're in a dorm, all metal and concrete, when you drop a penny, it'll echo. You can hear the echo, right? And they're slamming doors. Like you hear like a gun, like a shotgun going off right in there, right? And so you get up, what the hell is that, right? So people are like sleep deprived, right? So till today, my 5:30, in the morning getting up, I lost it because my body just shut down, and they turned the air conditioner on all day. So it was like, it's cold, Like I can't sleep now unless the temperature is like 50. I toss and turn and flop around because like the first 3 months, I was so cold. And, the blankets, like you either put the blanket on top of the bed or on top of yourself. And I just like, I didn't feel, I couldn't feel the bed, the rubber, the plastic thing behind me. So I just endured it, right? And my body somehow got used to the cold. But I mean, it's crazy. 14 months at this point, I would walk from my bed downstairs, sit down on the table. It's like 20 feet, 30 feet, right? Go back on the bed. That's my everything, my desk, my bed, my comfort place, all that, right? Just all in my bed. So I've been doing this so many years, and then finally, when I end up in another facility where this is like at the end of my ICE situation, I end up in another facility, and they have a place in a chow hall that you have to walk downstairs, right? And they actually let you go out in the yard so you have some sun, right? And I walk down the stair and my whole leg buckle, right? And I'm like, what the hell? Like, what the hell's going on here? Like, I'm a young man. Like, why my leg buckle like that, right? It took me a moment to realize that I have been walking for a year and a half, So my legs just fell asleep, because I haven't gone anywhere. I haven't gone to the yard. I've been locked up in this, this cage, right? This dorm for more than 12 months, 14 months almost, right? And so I realized, oh yeah, I haven't been doing anything under the stress, all this just kind of like eats up your body. And they say like the body keeps score, right? You feel all this stuff, it just adds up. But like ICE like blew me away. It just really blew me away. And when all these elders and these folks who got detained, like Anu was describing, like ICE was mass raiding them, bringing them in. Like some of them have been home for more than 3 decades. Like they committed a crime with their kids. They've moved on, right? Like now they're like, and some are like sole provider for the family, like they're the one who pays the bill. So they lose their home, they lose their car. Like it was a lot of stress, right? And like holding, and there's no one to hold space for them. No one to sit there to explain to them about the law, the procedure, and why they should fight for their family. So I was always getting a phone call. Like I had to like mentally, fortunately San Quentin has provided me with all these tools that I've learned in the program to really hold space for them, right? As a crisis counselor, I had to rely on a lot of those tools, and I sat there and talk with them, and then they were like, convince them like, hey, don't give up, you know, because people are talking about suicide and stuff, you know. I mean, like, it was gotten really bad, and then people were like, I'm just gonna sign and get deported. I don't want to put my family through this. I don't want to go through this, you know. Like they want to give up, and I would sit there and convince them and talk to them and explain it to them, and then afterward, I would have to talk to their family members and explain to them why they shouldn't not give up on their loved ones, why they should support their loved one, how to support them, and then how to navigate the prison system, right? It is so weird, and the whole time I'm like, why aren't there people doing this? You know, why doesn't the state provide this? Because the ICE manual, when you look at the manual, it looks so great. You have the support from staff, that you with your dignity, you're supposed to have all these things as a human being, right? That you're supposed to have, but none of that stuff is happening in this facility. So it was, and you know, Lord and behold, the same facility has now closed because of their inhumane practices. But we're putting people in there for years and years, right? And so, I mean, when I say 19 years, I mean, it's not just psychologically, physically. Like, I'm fighting my own case, trying to stay home. I'm afraid to get deported. And, you know, if not for the community member coming in, supporting me, and the letter I'm receiving, students are writing to me, remind me I'm not alone, I was ready to give up. I'm like, fuck it, I'm just gonna die here in prison. I mean, that was a good shot, right? But it got to that point, you know, it really got to, and I consider myself a really strong individual. And it got really bad to the point where I like, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to do this no more.
Your story reminds me of a quote that my dad says, just because you're going through hell doesn't mean you stop and take pictures. You just got to keep walking. And you kept walking.
I kept walking.
You kept walking. You either crawled, you did the 2-step sometimes, but you kept it moving. And trying not to cry. I'm not going to cry. But I think your story is quite powerful of how you kept walking and figuring it out, figuring it out, walking. Oh, I figured this out. Let me help someone else to help someone else, right? You still walked it out and you figured it out, right? As we're slowly coming to a close, because I want to still tease this part out. So with ICE, you were there for 14 months. So is that closed or still going on?
I was in there 18 total.
18 months, okay.
Yeah, an
okay.
ICE facility, because ICE, they move you around, right? That's another thing they don't tell you. Like ICE, when you're in ICE, you constantly get moved around. I was fortunate, I moved around a few times, but like other people would get moved around a lot, you know, every month or so. And partly like when you're moving, you're isolated from your family, from your legal, you know, from your lawyer and stuff, so you don't have the access, right? So makes it even harder, you know. And I'm telling you, it's exhausting. Traveling with ICE is exhausting, right? Because you're shackled out for hours, right? These trips are like 9-10 hours trips, sometimes more, right? Then they put you in this holding tank. They're supposed to be made for like 5. And you can actually Google and you see some of the sign that says capacity is 12, right? They put 30 people in those stuff. Like you couldn't really breathe, right? You go in there, and so you would stay there for hours and hours, and so it's just ICE exhausts you. It robs you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, for all your strength, you know. And I think that's why so many people have just given up and just signed paper to get deported, because they couldn't see themselves going through that whole process. And so, yes, that same facility has closed. They have closed it down, I think, a couple of years now?
It's still open, just not ICE said they're pulling out of it. But unfortunately, people in criminal custody are still sitting in that hellhole, the Rio Consumas Correctional Center.
Let me take a moment. Take that off. I have to say, this is your story reminds me of like triumph, like the definition of triumph, like definition of resiliency and just being your authentic, like finding your authentic voice, and not allowing your pain to like, what I want to say, circumvent you, but also like, what is this purpose that it can actually serve, not just for yourself and your own healing, your own journey, the intentions of not, you know, but like everybody else, because you realize it's not just you, it's other people too, right? Other family, cousins, aunts, grandmas, and that their family, their community, they're our neighbors, right? And so as we go on to the last section of the podcast is your impact on the community, right? Not just, I say community is your neighbor, like you're my neighbor. Like that's how I was raised with community. So, so tell us a little bit about as you transitioned out of ICE and then coming into the community, how was that for you?
Yeah,
so
I can just jump in about that
Okay.
transition. So
Yeah.
PJ got out after 18 months, and it wasn't because ICE sort of was being benevolent. I think partially it's because they realized PJ was not giving up. And a lot of their thing is to get people to give up. And it's just about turning people over. And they realized PJ is going to sit here and fight. And also community members, elected officials, organizations were just bombarding ICE and elected officials demanding his release. And so finally they released him with an ankle monitor, but he's still fighting deportation. So he's able to come home, but sort of it's not over yet.
Yeah, and my case manager. So I've been getting new case manager, every so often for my ICE. They call it ISAP, which is intensive appearance supervision, right? And basically you show up in person, they put you on an ankle monitor, and it's contracted by an organization called GEO, right? A global outsource.
It's a private prison company.
Yeah, and they pretty much like have prison out there and they own. Well, basically, ICE contract them to watch me and they put me on ankle monitor. So I would get new case managers every so often, and she's like, "Why are you still on that thing?" I'm like, "You tell me. Why am I still on the thing?" I mean, it's been almost 5 years now. Right? I'm still on this thing, right? And because it's weird, right? It's like and I don't know how to make of it because I'm home, and since I've been home, I've been working, in organizations. And I work for a Center for Empowering Refugees and Immigrants. I work with the elders. I've worked with the youth. I work with people who've been deported. I take it full time with APSC, and I have done a lot of reentry work. I know, I go around and teach people about criminalization workshop. And even before that, I was working with GRIP, which is an organization that I'm on the board now, and I've actually been with them since I was inside. And all to say that, I'm very active, right, in the community, and I've been spending, all my days just honoring, the memories of the people of harm, and really put where my promise, I live up to my promise, right, and my counselor all dumbfounded because she's like, and she looked at my record, she's like, this is remarkable, why are you still on that thing? I don't understand it, right? So I think that's the thing. Is the system is broken, and they don't see you today, who you are, right, and what you can do and what you're doing. What they see is something that happens a long time ago, and that's what they focus on. And I say that to say because the judge that denied me my bond hearing did the exact same thing. Like when I go for my bond hearing, so I got denied bond hearing a couple of times when I was in ICE, right? Because every 6 months they're supposed to give you a bond hearing. It's called the Rodriguez bond. And I was qualified under those during my 18 months, so I went there 3 times, right? She was always denying me, right? And the first time she denied me, my lawyer gave her this package of everything I've done, new psych hearing, my parole board hearing, the board recommendation, the governor, decision to let me go, and I have all the support letters and everything, right? She didn't read none of that. She during Trump time, they would just do the rubber stamp denial, so they just deny people. So one of the requirements when a judge deny you orally, they have to put in a memorandum. So she denied me orally, right? And then, she deemed me dangerousness. That was her decision. So I can't give you bond because you're still a danger. But then when she went to do the memorandum, she read my file. And now she realized she can't give me on dangerousness because it didn't make no sense. So she changed her mind and said, I'm a flight risk. So I think for me, that's a reflection of how the system is broken. And this is so common thing that's happening out there. And my case isn't unique because I'm just one of thousands of people's story, who walk this path, right? And so right now, I'm working with these human beings, Bun, Maria, Key, this amazing advocate, amazing community members who are just giving back, to the community. And all of us are any day could be ripped off from our family, from our community, put back in a detention center again and be deported. It's we lived through all this trauma through a whole time. And they're all juvenile lifers, they've been through prison with their kids. And so I think and I was wondering about this, it's saying about our society, we're supposed to be a forgiving second chance community, right? Especially in California, and we're not really honoring like those values because our action doesn't show it, And I want to say this, like Governor Brown tried to pardon me when I was years ago before I left office. Like he wanted to pardon me because of my work. He recognized my work, and he wanted to give me a second chance, but the court stopped him from signing my pardon paper. So now I'm back in the same boat. So we have an active. What I'm saying is we have an active pardon campaign for myself, for Key Lam, for Maria Lagarda, and for Chanton Bun, which is my colleague who's doing amazing work in the Bay Area. And they're not just doing work with APSC. They're like an organization. Some of them sit on the board, for other organization who does a lot of restorative justice work in the community. And we're trying to stay home with our family and end this like trauma, right? But we're continuously getting in, going backward. To me, I think like going backward, I'm stepping forward, but I'm going backward. I'm stepping forward, I'm going backward. And we're in limbo. So I don't know how to describe what limbo feels like, but it's not a good feeling, I feel like I can never move forward with my life, because I know like every hug I give my mom and my brother, my sibling, could be the last hug I give them. I could be back in detention and I could be deported and I could die in Cambodia to a country I was not even born in.
And to that, with all those thoughts in your head, and I'm going to go to closing remarks. And so what does the future look like for you?
If I don't get pardoned, I will be deported. That's my future.
No, but you're doing more. Like in the meantime, what is the more? Like that's like all of that is in your head. Like don't get me wrong, like that's there. But
if you ask me like how I see my life today, besides like looking forward to like my comment that's just made. So I feel like I'm one of the most blessed human beings in the world, right? Alive, and I think because I'm surrounded by people who loves me, people who care about me, and that's why that's why I would grieve hard, like the idea of being deported, being separated from them again, because I spent my whole life as a childhood, the day I was born, trying to find stability, trying to find family, trying to find people who really cares about me, who didn't reject me, who didn't, spit in my face and tell you, go back to your country, right? Like community members loves me, and now, and I think I don't want to lose that. I finally found it, and I think I'm blessed because when I work with the youth, and I see their like eye open because the workshop, and they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. I don't want to do that. Like it brings me so much joy, because, man, like no one was there for me. I wish that was me, but now I get to see it, what that would look like, right? And it brings me a lot of joy, dancing with my elders, and these are folks who survived genocide themselves, right? Watching them heal, listening to their story, like sharing moments with them, and helping people come home. Guy come home after years and years, hug his family, and it's like I get to watch that, but I'm a part of it, I'm a part of the changes, right? I get to go back to San Quentin and teach, train other facilitator, to work with kids, right? And I think that's a blessing, that's a blessing. And I don't look forward to getting deported, but I think even I would still be who I am today. I'll still be this person. I just hope I don't get deported because I loved my work and I love my family, my community, and I definitely don't want to go back to a country and just start the suffering all over again when I finally find that stability, right? I don't know. I think like every human being deserves to be loved, to be cared for, to be with their family, to find stability. And I just want the same thing for myself, I want that same thing, I think every human being should have it. And I guess what I'm saying is like I want what everyone else wants, just to be happy with my family and my community. So.
Any last words?
If you'd like to support PJ and APSC4, I think we'll drop links before. You can sign a postcard and send a message to Governor Newsom asking him to pardon PJ. And you can also check out the work Asian Prisoner Support Committee is doing online.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, PJ and Anoop, for being here and sharing your story, being vulnerable, giving us some straight facts, okay? And how we can best support the work that you guys are doing. So thank you.